Good morning, it's Troy Eckard with Eckard Land and Acquisition out of Allen, Texas. The federal government over the last month has made a couple of claims as to how they're going to try to help the oil and gas prices come back to a more reasonable level as far as pricing. And of course, along with this administration, another one of their great plans really are disastrous, both in form and in possible solution. The Biden administration has suggested that they would release oil from the SPR, the Strategic Reserves of the United States. And it's a combination of two things. It's replacing the 18 million barrels of oil that was acquired in spring of 2020 when the oversupply occurred, and the President of the United States at that time, President Trump, acquired 18 million barrels of oil in order to soften that supply hangover. By law, those barrels have to be sold back into the market, and it's about time to do that. Of the remaining 50 million barrels that the current administration would like to sell out of the SPR, those 32 million barrels effectively are going to be sold into the market. That's literally about a day and a half worth of oil consumption in the United States. Along with India, Japan, and other global consumers, they've been asked to maybe put some of their reserves back into the market to try to settle oil prices down from an upward trajectory. But the truth of the matter is that is also not going to work. The second solution after dumping oil out of the national supply and reserves of these different countries, including the U.S., the second solution that they have thrown around in this administration is we will stop having exportation of U.S. crude oil to other countries. Now, I'm going to address 1 and 2 very quickly. Number one, it tells you the state of affairs that when 3 or 4 of the highest consumers of fossil fuels, Japan, India, China, and the United States, are talking about dumping oil they put into their reserves back into the market to try to artificially lower prices, it's an absolute joke. We consume almost 40% more than we produce here in the U.S. China, Japan, India are almost completely 100% import type of producers and consumers. So from reality is, if you're asking me to take money out of my savings account to try to lower the price of bread, that doesn't really lower the price of bread other than a temporary solution, which is really almost nominal in any type of effect whatsoever. But what it does for a true financial review is it really highlights the desperation of trying to figure out how to slow down rising oil and gas prices. Okay. Now the second thing is along with that reduction in possible demand by overflowing oil, is let's hype up the new variant that's out there. Let's take Omicron, which the doctor that discovered in South Africa says has very mild symptoms. Let's tell everybody that it's going to be really bad. Let's try to shut down the borders again, and that's going to slow down demand for crude oil, which will push crude oil prices down again, just temporarily. Now, the other possible solution that this administration is trying to project, what I said earlier, is they would like to stop having the United States from exporting oil. Now, after World War II, there was almost a 60, 70-year period of time where oil could not be exported out of the United States. That law was changed back in like 2008, 2009. As of about a month ago, we were exporting 3.8 million barrels per day. I want to explain to you how that works. First off, the refineries in the United States are antiquated and 60 to 70 years old. They have been designed to process a certain level or gravity of crude oil, basically trying to get to a blended 42-degree West Texas intermediate gravity. The reason why it's so important that we export is that most of these shale basins, like the Permian Basin, Delaware Basin, the Anadarko Basin, the crude oil is such a high gravity crude oil that the refiners cannot process it, at least not in an adequate manner or profitable manner. If you take a look at the oil on the right, it's black, it's dark. Let's just call this 42-degree gravity crude oil. Okay? This oil over here is lighter and almost looks like gasoline. 2 different oil wells in Texas. One of it's heavy gravity, about 42. One is light gravity or high gravity crude oil at around 50 to 52 degrees. Normally what happens is the refiners will take a heavier crude with a lighter crude. They'll blend them together to try to get to that 42-degree gravity crude oil. Well, when the shale basins were discovered 15 years ago, the refiners were not prepared to take the influx of millions of barrels a day of high gravity crude oil because they need the byproducts that are extracted from that oil to create synthetics and plastics and all the other things that are made from a barrel of oil. So the whole idea is that the reason the exportation was allowed is the U.S. government decided we have all this great oil, we have no way of refining it, let's let the producers export it, and that'll soften the global market for pricing because now there is a new supplier in the market called the U.S. oil and gas industry. Now, as of now, we're about 3.8 million barrels a day of exportation. The Biden administration is talking about a second step to try to solve rising oil prices is to stop allowing U.S. producers from exporting. Now, let's think about that logically. I've got 50 to 60 degree gravity shale oil. The refineries say, we can't use it, we don't want it, you got to export it because we have no way of getting enough crummy, low gravity oil to blend to get to 42 degree gravity. That's what was going to happen with the Keystone Pipeline. We were going to bring in the Canadian oil, that's just really, really low gravity, mix it with our high gravity crude oil, and probably be energy independent within 5 years because all of their oil blended with our shale oil made for a perfect match for our refineries. If the Biden administration decides to ban the exportation of oil, what are our producers going to do with that 4 million barrels a day? They can't sell it to our refineries. There's only one choice left. Shut their wells in, choke the wells down, let them produce less because there's nowhere to go because you can't process or refine the type of oil that's this high of gravity. So the solution sounds good in the media. Hey, I'll stop the U.S. producers from exporting. You told the U.S. energy industry to export it because you wouldn't allow the refineries to be retrofitted or refabricated to handle higher gravity crude oil. So if you stop the exportation of crude oil, two things are going to happen. The global consumers out there that have been buying that 3 million barrels a day are now going to go to other providers like Saudi Arabia and OPEC and ask for them to give the 4 million barrels from their own production. Now we have competition on a global market trying to buy oil against a new consumer, which is the 4 million barrels that we no longer are supplying from U.S. energy sources. On top of that, what happens is now all of a sudden we have U.S. producers who are being told, we don't need your 4 million barrels a day. Cut your wells back, choke your wells in, and stop delivering the 4 million barrels a day of the high gravity crude oil. There's only one outcome from that, ladies and gentlemen. That's much, much higher prices. So you don't take one hand, put it in the other pocket, and say you end up with more money. You're just changing dollars from one pocket to the other. In this case, if you stop the exportation of crude oil, all you've done is create 4 million barrels of higher demand in the global market, and we end up with 4 million barrels a day we have nowhere to go with, so we shut in those wells. Now we drop from 11 million barrels a day down to 7 million barrels a day of crude oil. Now we're not only energy non-independent, but now we're even more dependent on foreign oil, which is going to come at a higher price because of global competition. Hey, listen, I'm Troy Eckard. I have an opinion. It's not always right. You may not agree with me, but I'm just giving you some food for thought and things to relate to your own brain with regard to where energy prices are going. And I'll tell you where they're going. They're going to go much, much higher because we do not have an energy secretary who understands one thing about the U.S. fossil industry. We have a government who is anti-fossil fuels and wants to promote alternative energies at whatever price it takes. And the truth be known, it's about $125 a barrel of oil for West Texas Intermediate before any alternative energy becomes even somewhat economically comparable. I'm Troy Eckard with Eckard Land and Acquisition. I hope you appreciate my commentary.